carbohydrates. So now we have two kinds of molecules that are used to store energy. They are parts of the cell membrane. Remember that your cell membrane is made of two layers of lipids. In this picture down here, you have a picture of the cell membrane. Because it's made of two layers of lipids, we call it a lipid bilayer. Bi means two, so it's two layers, or a bilayer. Another use for lipids is for insulation. You can think about a polar bear. It has a lot of fat under its skin so that it can stay warm, because those lipids and that fat keeps the heat inside their body so that they can stay warm. Alright, we're going to talk about proteins next. Proteins are made of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, just like the lipids and the carbohydrates were. But we have one more thing that's a part of a protein, and that is nitrogen. Another name for a protein is a polypeptide, and this can get confusing because you just learned about polysaccharides, and that sounds very similar. So you can always remember that polypeptides are proteins because the pep part of that word starts with P, and that P can remind you of a protein. Now, polysaccharide is a starch, so you can always remember that the saccharin part of that word starts with S, and that S can stand for starch. Okay, if a protein, you can imagine a protein is sort of like a pearl necklace. The whole necklace is the whole protein. And each of the pearls, or the beads on the necklace, would be called an amino acid. And you can remember that amino acids make proteins because amino sounds a little bit like a mean old acid. So you can imagine the meanest cartoon character that you can think of, and it has pointy teeth and horns. It just looks really mean. And if it's mean like that, it's probably going to have to eat a lot of meat to stay big and strong and mean. So a mean old acid eats meat, which is protein. That's how you can remember that amino acids are used to make proteins. There are only 20 different kinds of amino acids. And you can think about it kind of like the alphabet. There are only 26 letters in the English language, but we have millions of different kinds of words. And so just like that, we have 20 amino acids that we can combine in different orders and different lengths to make different kinds of proteins. This is a picture of a protein. Remember, it's sort of like a long necklace. The whole necklace is the protein. Each of the beads on the necklace is an amino acid. Now, an amino acid isn't really round. In fact, it looks like this molecule up in the corner here. That's what an amino acid looks like. But when we simplify it to make it a little easier to understand, we can draw it as just a round circle, sort of like a bead. But you do need to understand that an amino acid looks like this molecule here in the corner. So this is an amino acid, and this whole thing together is a protein. Some examples of proteins include enzymes. Enzymes are a type of protein, and they're used to speed up chemical reactions. You have enzymes in your digestive system so that your body can digest food more quickly. Another use for proteins is in protein channels. Now, protein channels are sort of like doors in the cell membrane, because sometimes the cell needs to get large things into it, and large things can't go through the cell membrane without damaging it. And so you have doors in your cell membrane that we call protein channels, and those are made of protein. Hormones are also made of protein, and your muscles are made of protein. Now, actin and myosin are part of your muscles. You can think about them sort of like Velcro. When you flex a muscle, the actin and myosin, or the Velcro in your muscle, stick together, and the little hooks on the Velcro stick. But when you relax the muscle, the actin and myosin act like Velcro and they release, and so they let go. And that's how your muscles move, by contracting and sticking together that actin and myosin, and relaxing and letting go, sort of like Velcro. Alright, the function in living things for proteins, well, this isn't really a function, but you need to know that they are made by ribosomes, and you'll learn about ribosomes. They're a part of a cell. That's where protein is made. The function that we need for proteins in your body are for protein channels to move things into or out of the cells. They also control the rate of chemical reactions, and that type of protein is called an enzyme. They also serve as chemical messengers, so they're sort of like the mailmen of your body, sending messages to the other parts of your body to let them know what's going on. And those chemical messengers are a protein called hormones. And then they also form parts of your bone and muscles. So most of your body is made of proteins. And proteins you can think of kind of like plastic. Um, plastic can make a lot of different things, but it's all just plastic. And so proteins, while most proteins are pretty similar, they can make a lot of different things just by the way that they're shaped and molded and the size that they are. So proteins are a little bit like plastic in that way, that they can form a lot of different things. Now, the last kind of biomolecule is called nucleic acid. A nucleic acid is made of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and one more thing called phosphorus. And just like proteins are made of amino acids, nucleic acids are made of a smaller piece called a nucleotide. And a nucleotide has three parts. It has a nitrogen base. Nitrogen bases are, there are 4 different kinds, and if you've learned anything about DNA, you'll recognize the letters that stand for the nitrogen bases. They are A for adenine, T for thymine, C for cytosine, and G for guanine. Those are your nitrogen bases in DNA, and if you haven't learned that yet, we'll learn about that later in the year. So your nitrogen bases can be one of those 4. The other 2 parts of the nucleotide are the sugar and the phosphate group. So let's look at this picture. In this picture you have little pentagons with an S in them. That's the sugar. Notice that it's a ring shape just like the sugars we looked at before when we were learning about carbohydrates. The S is the sugar. You have a little black circle with a P in it. That's the phosphate group. So together the sugars and the phosphate groups make a backbone for this strand of DNA. And we have a backbone on either side of the DNA made of sugar and phosphate. Now in the middle of the DNA we have our nitrogen bases. And remember that nitrogen bases can be A's, T's, C's, or G's, and one of those 4 letters. And they're always going to be paired. A will always pair with T, C will always pair with G. So you have a nucleotide highlighted right here. A nucleotide is made of 1 phosphate group, 1 sugar, and 1 nitrogen base. It doesn't have to be G, it can be any one of those letters, but it has to be one of them. So these 3 together make a nucleotide. So in this picture we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 nucleotides across the bottom, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 nucleotides total in this picture. So you should recognize these 3 parts together as a nucleotide and be able to tell me how many nucleotides there are in this picture. Now, like I said, this is a strand of DNA, but it has been flattened. So if you've seen a picture of DNA before, it looks kind of like a twisted ladder. That's called a double helix, but in this picture we've taken that ladder and we've flattened it out. So we have the 2 sides of the ladder and then the rungs of the ladder down the middle. Now nucleic acids come in 2 varieties. We are either going to have deoxyribonucleic acid, which is a long word for DNA, or we have ribonucleic acid, which is abbreviated as RNA. The function in living things for nucleic acids are that they store and pass on genetic information, which are your traits, things like eye color and hair color, and they pass it on from one generation to the next. So nucleic acids are used to transfer that genetic information. There are 2 kinds, DNA and RNA, and RNA is special because it is used to make new proteins. Alright, these are the 4 kinds of biomolecules, and some chemical composition information, pictures, examples, and the function of each of those 4.